Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Friday, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at the full moon that's coming up tonight into tomorrow, as well as the sun moving into an opposition with Saturn and square with Uranus. Of course, we had to throw one more T-square in there before the end of the summer, right? So Mercury will actually go through it as well. So I actually lied. There'll be two more. But let's just take a look at the full moon first. So as I am making this on Friday afternoon here, the moon is just passing over the conjunction with Pluto, the lord of the underworld. Pluto means riches, but if you track the mythology back a little ways to Hades, they are slightly different characters. It's interesting to note some of those differences if you can do a deep dive. One of my favorite books actually was called Dream and the Underworld, or The Dream and the Underworld. I can't remember, but it's by James Hillman. And he talks a lot about underworld mythology and Hades. And that the reason that this full moon is so powerful, let's back it up to the new moon and just take a look at where we've been. So I am going to back this up by like 2 weeks. So here's the new moon that came through in Cancer. And that new moon in Cancer was moving into an opposition with Pluto. This was around July 9th. So since then, the applying opposition from the sun to Pluto has passed. Let's look at that. So you can see that about the first quarter moon around July 16th into the 17th, happy if you shared a birthday around that time with me, you're going to have an interesting solar return chart for the year ahead. Okay, so here is that first quarter moon, and you can see the T-square being created with Pluto right there. Then we get up to the full moon, and the full moon brings that Plutonian energy in. It swings through the conjunction right as the moon opposes the sun in Leo. Okay, so you could, it would take a lot of, very thoughtful, careful analysis to track out, each phase that I've just unpacked. But let's make it simple. When you start off a new moon in the sign of Cancer, you're often starting from a place that's emotional, that's vulnerable, that is rooted in something to do with your family, your home, your living environment, family karma. The moon ruled things in Cancer will tend to point to the unconscious spaces in our life. By unconscious, there's a lot of people that, we use the word unconscious, we don't always know what it means. If you think about the word unconscious, you're not talking about like things that you're completely oblivious of, that you have no idea that they exist. They exist, but it's like your awareness of them is turned down. Whereas, let's say, for example, I'll just give you a simple example. I'm going to turn off the screen sharing for a second. So let's just say that I'm going through my daily routines, right? I get up, I do my mantra meditation, I work out, I create content. I mean, those of you who followed me for a while know that I have like a pretty solid routine. I'm pretty aware and awake for those routines because they are activities that require conscious participation. It's very easy to become unconscious when you meditate, as anybody knows. So some aspects of the meditation, my awareness of the fact that I am meditating and that I'm present, will go away because I'll drift off into thoughts. My ability to recall everything that I thought about for the 10 minutes that I realized I just drifted off into thought land for a while. It's not necessarily bad to do that or anything in meditation, like the part of the process. But my awareness is turned down significantly. And I don't even remember what I was thinking for the last 10 minutes. Okay. But it's not that I wasn't aware. It's not that I was unconscious totally. There's always some degree of consciousness. So now let's try another example. At the end of the day, let's say I'm really exhausted and it's time to spend some time with my girls. If I'm really exhausted and maybe I'm not taking good care of myself, the likelihood that I am conscious and present for my girls, which is what they want and need the most from me. Really, if I had to boil it down to what I think my girls like need from me the most, it's just for me to be present, aware, responsive, conscious, alert and present to them. So in the evening when I'm wiped, and I think a lot of parents can probably relate, my ability to do things, say things, listen from a space of like attentive, conscious awareness is sometimes really poor. And so then I will realize in the midst of dealing with, displaying some parenting pattern that I don't like, I'll say, gosh, I just dropped into that again. I just dropped into doing that again. How did I even, that was really thoughtless on my part. Usually it happens because I haven't necessarily taken good enough care of myself. One of the reasons that we meditate is literally to make sure that our consciousness stays strong. It's like a muscle, and that we don't drift off into super unconscious activity. Now, some people will say, well, I don't want to be awake or alert all the time. Then that seems like you're just trying to be in control of things all the time. And actually being awake or alert is more like learning how to stay in a flow state, but you're staying present so you're fluid, things are organic. It's not like trying to control everything. So a lot of times early on in meditation, people really struggle with meditation because they think that they have to control their mind or control their thoughts. And as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the mind is like impossible to control. It'll just go wherever it wants to. You have to, so we learn to control it by entering into a relationship with it, a healthy relationship with the mind. We stay awake and alert to the mind, realizing I am not my mind, but it's a servant, it's a helper, it's a friend. Or if I'm not cultivating it in this way, then it can become an enemy. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because the start of a moon cycle in Cancer, in Cancer in general, can point to the two things. One, the sublunary world, this realm that we live in, the material world, and the earth, and how it was conceptualized by ancient philosophers and astrologers, is thought to be a lunar place, which means that largely it is a place that is moving according to, it's like a merry-go-round that everyone's asleep on, and just dancing, flickering shadows of activities, like the Matrix, if you ever saw that movie. No one's aware that they're in the Matrix. No one's using the muscle of awareness. So the moon can come to represent the slumbering sort of unconscious dimension of life. And for many people, that slumbering unconscious dimension of life, as Plato said, is not to be trifled with. If you try to get people to wake up, it's like, to use a very Cancerian image, don't take my blanket, don't take my doll, don't take my, the separation anxiety that a child may feel from their mother. Similarly, staying unconscious, because it puts us into this flow where we don't have to be very awake or alert. And there's something about that feels very safe to us. And so it's scary when someone says, hey, you should wake up. Hey, you're doing something that's really unconscious. And yet most people in life, if they just slumber and drift along the river of material fluctuations, they will come to a space where they will realize that, I need awareness, or I need to be more alert or awake, or why am I here? Or what am I doing? Or how is any of this happening? Or people will come to realize that their unconscious habits or behaviors are starting to create some monsters, some demons, so to speak. So the ignorant refusal to come out of our slumber creates monsters. This is at the heart of what a moon cycle in Cancer, with the opposition to Pluto and then the full moon with Pluto, involves. Okay, so we're talking about the unconscious resting places in our lives that are very vulnerable and sensitive to us, and then the potential for there to grow some rot in those places, some festering, trapped, darkness, basically, because there will always be a call from the gods, from God, from angels, from saints, from other friends, from the environment, from nature, from the stars. There's always there's built into the universe opportunities at every turn to become more awake or conscious. That does not mean to be more in control. That does not mean to be hating the material world or rejecting it. It means to be awake. It means to be present and to fully engage our senses, both material and spiritual, in our lives, and to move through life in touch with the way things are going, to be able to make virtuous choices, to see and experience beauty, which you really can't do fully when you're just sleeping along the lazy river, so to speak. So, you know, there's still, I like to think, I just went inner tubing for my birthday. And I think that there's, so it's kind of it was a lazy river day. And I kept saying, as we were going along, I said, this river is like life, super cheesy thing to say, but I couldn't help it because, the tubes were occasionally like getting stuck in like these branches and we have to push off from them. And, it's like my daughter was screaming at one point over some like goldfish or something super ridiculous. So, and I just kept going like, yeah, like, so isn't it better? I mean, it's a beautiful river to drift down, this material adventure that we're on, but isn't it so much better to do it aware and awake, to really take it in and enjoy it, to be careful so we use our arms and legs to navigate and not get caught up in things. You know what I mean? So anyway, the point is that the encounter with Pluto, for example, one of the ways in which you'll see in mythology, in mythology and fairy tales, in famous movies and stuff like that, that whatever you try to neglect or rid yourself of or push out will have a way of coming back. It'll have a way of returning. So, for example, I always think of Star Wars for this particular example, but it's a little bit more of the dark father motif than the dark mother motif. Typically Pluto might be a little bit more like a dark mother motif, but in Star Wars, there's this feeling with Luke Skywalker that he wants to avoid this confrontation with darkness. There's in Empire Strikes Back, there's this cave that he has to go into, and Yoda's like, "Don't bring your weapons," and Luke is like, straps on his lightsaber, and he's like, "Whatever," and he goes into the cave, and then he has this really gnarly encounter with Darth Vader, and he chops off his head with a lightsaber, and Darth Vader's mask falls open, and it turns out that it's Luke Skywalker's own face. It's like, well, what's that about? Well, it's that, that's a place where he's meeting his own shadow, which was, in this case, his aggression, his anger, and his fear. And it was personified by this projected image of Darth Vader. So that's whatever we avoid or try to push out and say, no, it doesn't belong, it doesn't exist. It could be someone whose point of view we're uncomfortable with, or it could be, it could be a reality of life or nature that we say, oh, I'm just, like, for example, I was showing my daughter's Planet Earth, BBC's Planet Earth, and I forgot how like totally it's like the bloodiest. They're all killing each other and stuff. And, my daughters were like, no. Like, and I was like, yeah, okay, we're not going to watch this. This is crazy. Like the gazelle is getting eaten, so it's like, let's not do this. But I couldn't help but notice that like there will come a time where it's important for them to see that. Right now, it's like there's a llama, someone has a llama on their farm that we saw, or there's or an alpaca, I guess, or there's bunny rabbits, so it's like having this experience that nature is gentle and sweet and comfortable, and that there's just this kind of unconscious, beautiful, harmonious flow going on out there. My kids sort of need that for the moment, but pretty soon they'll come to also understand that it's like tooth and nail out there, right? So that's Pluto. You can't, because if you try to avoid or resist what's there, there was a really good movie called Amongst White Clouds. It was about Taoist hermits living in the mountains. Check it out if you ever want to watch a good documentary. And this like kind of not naive, but he was kind of like, a young person who was filming them up there, and he was like interviewing these monks. And he said to one of them, like, yeah, so like you're just going out and you're becoming like one with nature and stuff like that. And he was like, if you want to know what nature is, go and sit in the woods for a week or two and don't move. Just like sit on this rock and don't move for 2 weeks. And what happens to you if you do that? That will be nature. And so of course he was talking about the different predators, the bugs, all sorts of things that would consume and devour him. And then he said that also is nature, really important. So Cancer with the opposition to Pluto and Capricorn is a bit like that. We started the moon cycle in the space of sweetness, sensitivity, vulnerability, opening up those spaces or cultivating them. But then we're also really dialoguing with Pluto this month. What's being rejected? What's being repressed? What's in the shadow? What do we have to face that is uncomfortable, that you can't let linger, So that's a big part of what this cycle is all about. Now, remember, we hit Sun opposite Pluto at the first quarter moon. Now, full moon, we're hitting the moon, moving through a conjunction with Pluto as it then moves into the opposition with the sun. So I would call this a moment of synthesis where, of course, every full moon, you're seeing the presence of a polarity, a dynamic tension between opposites in some area of your life. Could be pretty minor depending on the moon cycle, could be big depending on the moon cycle in your birth chart. But when the backstory of the full moon, which presents these polarities, and then the question, hey, can you make a meaningful synthesis out of this in your life? Or can you learn from the tension of the opposites, or can you simply hold them and allow them to exist? But that moment, that crucible of the full moon is deeply intensified when it starts off with an opposition to Pluto, and then it culminates with a conjunction to Pluto. So this is a funny thing, whereas you would think that's why I said I think there's synthesis possible at this full moon for us mentally, psychologically, emotionally, some feeling of catharsis, of breakthrough in terms of seeing and understanding unconscious patterns and changing them. We have Saturn Uranus in the background still telling us it's okay to make big changes and to change around structures and to revise disciplines and things like that. Well, if we get to if the new moon in the first quarter moon, we're amplifying the Sun Pluto opposition and the moon square Pluto and the moon opposite Pluto, this full moon begins with the moon conjoined with Pluto, which to me signals that there's a moment of breakthrough, of synthesis that's possible. The full moon will still present a kind of tension, but we're ready to work through something. Okay, so that's the way that I'm seeing it. The funny thing is that right now, let me bring the real-time clock back up. Right after we get through this, here it is. So right after we get through this, if I move this forward just a little bit, let's take this Pluto Sun opposition. Let's look at the full moon here. Here's the moon and here's the sun moving through their opposition full moon. That's tonight, late tonight, Friday, July 23rd. Okay, so if there's this moment of potential synthesis, a moment of deep awareness that's been bubbling up from maybe more vulnerable areas in our lives. That's why I mentioned home, family, more vulnerable emotional spaces, and a lot of learning about what's unconscious and how did it get unconscious. I would venture to say that it's almost always more important to ask ourselves, how do I fix a problem that I'm dealing with now, than it is to say, where exactly did it come from and who do I blame? The reason for that is that just in my experience as an astrologer and in understanding the philosophy of ancient astrologers, is that the material universe itself was understood as a great cycle, a great circle. For example, the Stoics thought that the same universal cycle repeated itself in exactly the same way over and over. The cyclical understanding of time suggests that all events, there's an infinite regression backward. You can go as far back in time as you want, in a sense, before you come back around to the present moment. So there is never just one cause of something. There's a kind of infinite series of regressive causes that eventually loop back around to the current moment. It's kind of a mind-bending thing to think about, I know, but for that reason, if you are going to think about where something came from in the past, it's important to diversify your understanding of where something in the past came from. Try to find 5 or 6 or 7 different ways that something from the past caused whatever you're dealing with right now. They will be there. You'll find many layers of causality. And then think about those causes and what caused them. Kind of go back one more step. If you do that, then you're starting to diversify your understanding of causality, which also means that you start to diversify your approach to making positive changes going forward. The more linear you are about where things came from in the past, the more linear you will be in the present, trying to make new things happen in your life. And really what we need to do is diversify our free will portfolio, and understanding that causes are complex and have complex backgrounds, and causes now that things that we're choosing now can have it's like, take a multi-pronged approach to creating your life using your free will, and understanding that you make choices. As the ancients would say, the man proposes, the gods dispose. So we make choices, but they interact in this incredibly fluid medium that's where a lot of things go out of our control. So take a multi-dimensional approach to how you're using your free will, at the same time that you take a multi-dimensional approach to understanding where things came from. Now, why am I saying all of that? Again, because this full moon is moving through the tension of the vulnerable places in our lives, potentially the unconscious places in our lives, and then this Plutonian catharsis to become aware of the shadows that exist there, the disease, the problems that become very toxic, and then we have to confront and like deal with them. But don't deal with them in terms of, well, now I know where it came from and I know just the one thing I need to do. Think of 10 places it came from, and think of 2 steps back in the causal chain. Think of 3 or 4 different things you could do, and think of 3 or 4 different possibilities about where those things could go in terms of their outcomes. We will tend to be much happier and more dynamic. It's like the ecology of our bodies, our souls, our lives need that kind of multidimensional thinking about choice, about past, and about future. Anyway, okay. So now, as this evolves, next week, what we're going to be talking about is the sun moving through the opposition with Saturn and the square to Uranus. So that Saturn-Uranus square is still very much in the air. And I've talked at length about that. So go back in my videos if you haven't heard me speak about Saturn-Uranus before. The Saturn-Uranus square videos, there's probably 6 or 7 of them at this point. But sun is going to enter into that dance. And here's the thing, these are all fixed signs. The sun in Leo is very powerful in terms of creating ideals and action plans for our lives. Things that will empower us, give us a bold feeling of courage, strength, inner dignity, pride, possibly in the healthiest possible ways, but also sometimes in very unhealthy and willful and stubborn and proud ways. Now, all of that sense of ego, where am I going? What am I doing? What does it require to get there? What kind of sacrifices do I have to make? What kind of systematic changes do I need to make? What insights and accelerated thoughts and enthusiasm am I receiving? These are the kinds of tensions that are going to be brought up with the sun and Saturn and the sun and Uranus in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be visiting that next week. But the point is that this full moon already amplifies that tension that's going to be building now. So one way of thinking about this full moon is also, what are you feeling jazzed about? Like, what are you feeling really excited about? What are you feeling that you need to bring forth from within you? It's a very Leo sun kind of thing. The sun was associated with the ideal image toward which any action is aimed. What is this evening going to be like? Oh, it's going to be so nice. We're going to go do this. We're going to go do that. It's like a little light in the sky that you're following, that you're trying to recreate. So the moon, remember, the moon is like a reflective light, and the moon will, as a reflective light, either signify the dull, void, unconscious, like material that's behind it because it doesn't have a light of its own, or it will represent that attempt to make this life most like the best ideal images, to reflect how can I make my life reflect or reflective of the highest virtues, ideals. So goodness, beauty, compassion, generosity, patience, all of these virtues, friendships, worthy endeavors, good uses of my time. We all know that we feel like I've got to make my life reflect these ideals. So the moon, in its most positive sense, is how can I change my material circumstances to be reflective of the light of higher truth or the light of these higher ideals or ambitions? So the transformation from Pluto that's creating this awareness is also going to go right into effect with the sun in Leo. And sun in Leo says, now I've got a bold new plan from the heart. We're going to do strong things. Still got Mars in Leo, right? So it could be a little like warrior like even. But the point is that now that there's going to be this time, how do I put that into action? How do I make that happen? What kind of sacrifices do I make? Et cetera. So we're going to unpack that dynamic that I'm just starting to talk about with the sun and Saturn, the sun and Uranus, quite a bit next week, but it's good to have a little preview of what's going on right now. So I said at the beginning, I wasn't sure how good of a job I could do at unpacking the nuances of every stage of the lunar cycle. Gave it a try. Hopefully it landed and you could at least follow along with the symbols well enough to make of them what you will as you reflect on them in your own life right now. So if you have good stories that tag along with any of this and you don't mind me sharing them in the comments section, put #grabbed. That's our little, and we have an email address set up. So I will probably next week, I'll start giving out that email address so you can send us your stories and we're going to be compiling them for the sake of putting some videos together in the future. Okay, well, that is what I have for you guys today. I hope you have a very happy new full moon and that these Plutonian powerful transformations and becoming more aware of, turning the volume up a little, becoming more aware of what's unconscious. I hope that they have been really invigorating. Hang in there if they've been difficult. Try to say thank you. Try to open up your hands and say thank you, even if it's a little bit hard. I find that always helps me if I can remember. So yeah, good luck, everyone. We'll see you guys next week. Take it easy. Bye.